Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Pete Makopoulos. I'm a trans man. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a volunteer attorney and the board president with Trans Legal Aid Clinic Houston. We help adults and minors across the state of Texas correct their name and/or gender markers on their identifying documents. So that's what that organization does. I am going to be the MC tonight. And to do so, I am going to share my screen and display a PowerPoint presentation for the majority of this. And we have some great panelists here tonight, which I'm really excited to get into. So I'll go ahead and start sharing that PowerPoint so we can see the important stuff. All right. Tonight's event is sponsored by a few organizational partners. We really appreciate these partners. Doctors for Change is obviously leading this event. Lambda Legal, Resource Center, Borderland Rainbow Center, Trans Legal Aid Clinic Houston, Equality Texas, and National Association of Social Workers, the Texas Chapter, have sponsored this event. We appreciate their participation and help. Here are some of those logos of these sponsors that we have that we're partnered with. At the end, I'll encourage you to follow some of these as they're great resources and they really are helpful. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. But again, thank you to the partners sponsoring this tonight. Tonight's agenda, a few things. First, the primary reason to kick this off is the recent letters, Greg Abbott's letter to Department of Family and Protective Services and Department of Family and Protective Services response to that letter. What do they mean? Shelly Skeen of Lambda Legal is going to walk us through that. She's an expert and she'll be able to hopefully answer some of the questions that you have standing out to that. To the extent we don't get to those in our main session here, there will be a Q&A at the end. Next, we'll talk about something that's really important, segueing from that, getting support. This is a really trying time, as are most times in recent years, for the parents of trans and non-binary people in the state of Texas and those trans and non-binary people themselves. So we'll talk about the importance of mental health and physical well-being. When I say I mean we'll be hearing from Brenda Risch, who's a licensed clinical social worker, a PhD, and it's from Borderland Rainbow Center. And she'll offer some really important insight about how to cope through these times and what to do as we persevere through what will probably be several more trying legislative sessions. We'll also hear from other parents of trans youth. Rachel Gonzalez, who's a rock star advocate and mom, will be talking. And then we will have some tips for testifying going forward in these legislative sessions that will be upcoming. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, we'll have a Q&A to talk about what's on your mind about any of these topics, subtopics, or other things that we didn't cover here tonight. Look forward to hearing from all of our great panelists and hopefully providing a little bit of hope and additional information to color what we're going through right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Shelly at Lambda Legal.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here tonight with you all. And just wanted to say that Lambda Legal, if you're not familiar with us, we are the oldest and largest national organization working for full and lived equality for LGBTQ plus folks and people who are living with HIV. And we have been around since 1973. I work in the Dallas office, and again, I'm really grateful to be here. Want you all to know that we have a help desk that is staffed with 4 full-time attorneys. We're the only legal org that has 4 full-time attorneys that fields calls into our help desk. We get about 7,500 calls a year from all over the country. And so if you feel like you've been treated unfairly, you feel like something is not right in your gut, feel free to reach out to our help desk. And then what will happen is they will let the attorneys either in the Dallas office or one of our other offices know, and then get you in touch, hopefully with the help that you need. We can't always help. We have cooperating attorneys that we work with, that we refer folks to. So please reach out to our help desk. So having said that, let's just briefly talk about what we've seen in the letter from the governor. I'm going to call it, I'm going to say to DFPS, or CPS, the Department of Family and Protective Services here in our state, and then also a little bit about the response. And then I'll also talk about a recent letter Brian Slayton, who is a representative, sent to the commissioner asking for a little bit more information about how CPS, so I'll use the term CPS, might treat a potential claim that there has been child abuse against a child. So here's where we are. A lot of the governor's letter, and I'm happy to answer more detailed questions, but it's really political theater. So the governor is asking the commissioner to make an opinion about something that has not happened yet, number one. And number two, the commissioner cannot determine and decide by herself whether or not something constitutes child abuse. So let's just start there. That's why I'm saying it's political theater. What the governor asked, in essence, also part of it, has been in law since 1999. So it's already there. And so that's not a current threat to us. And then the important thing to know is that actually the legislature, during our last legislative session, has done many things to protect the rights of parents and to protect the rights of kids. And so let me talk about what that looks like. The definition of child abuse includes a subsection called neglect. And in that particular section, it used to be that you could be held liable for child abuse if there was a substantial risk to a child. Now, it is such that you have to engage in a blatant disregard of harm to a child and that child is in immediate physical danger. So the definition of child abuse is now actually higher than it was before. So that's one thing to know. The second thing to know is the reporting requirement that we've heard a lot about. There are what are called mandatory reporters. So anyone who is licensed by the state is a mandatory reporter, and they have to report child abuse within 48 hours of when they believe that they have learned of it or have seen it. And so what's important about that? As of September 1, the standard for having to report child abuse, if you are a mandatory reporter, has actually gone up. It used to be cause to believe, which is what you see in the commissioner's letter. That will no longer be in effect on September 1. As of September 1, it will be reasonable cause to believe. And so the standard there is now requires more evidence to show child abuse. And then the last thing I would say is that the commissioner's letter says that certain treatments, if they are within a doctor's, in essence, advice, orders, diagnosis, that those treatments, if they're medically necessary, that does not constitute child abuse. So that should be our focus. It shouldn't be on what I really believe is Governor Abbott trying to stave off his challengers who have made surgery for trans kids, which many of us know rarely, if ever, happens with kiddos, certainly not under the age on average of 16. But it is really political theater. So I hope that this part of what I'm saying helps dispel any worries and any fears. The last thing I would say is there are other changes in the family code, one of which is that any parent who has a doctor who has seen their child, that court, before determining whether there has been child abuse or whether that child should have supervised visits with their parents, that parent's medical doctor must be provided with an opportunity to testify. And so then that gets into the best practice medically necessary care that we see for trans youth in our state. So what I want everybody to leave, what I'm saying today is that this really is political theater from a practical standpoint. Nothing has really changed. And then lastly, actually what we do have is the legislature doing our families and our parents a favor because they've given us more rights to make determinations about how we raise our children and how we bring them up with respect to their health, welfare, and well-being. So I hope that's helpful to you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Shelley. We are going to move on to our next slide, and this is going to be where Brenda takes the wheel and talks us through the importance of mental health.
So I'm Brenda Risch, as our moderator introduced me, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I just want to emphasize that you are going to be okay. You will survive this. We have a lot of ways that we can help and support you. And there are a lot of Texas therapists and caregivers who are committed to making sure that families and trans youth are safe and well during and after this process. So you're not alone in this. That's the #1 thing for you to know. So some practical tips in terms of how to manage what's happening right now for yourself. First of all, if you're experiencing distress or an escalation of symptoms that are concerning, please reach out to your local LGBT center for a referral to a licensed and qualified mental health provider. There are providers who are well-versed in working with the families of transgender folks and with transgender youth. So please reach out to us. We are here to help you. Secondly, there are lots of free resources, support groups, things like this that your local LGBT center can provide. And I want you to remember, even if you live in a rural part of Texas that is not near a big city or does not have a lot of resources, all of us who have centers have been working very hard to provide resources via email, telephone, and video conferencing. So you are not alone either. There's a way for us to help you. You just need to reach out if you need that. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to go over some specific things you should keep in mind. So there's 5 principles for responding to trauma, because what's happening for folks is in fact trauma. And that is something, a trauma is anything that overwhelms our ability to cope and respond. And that is what many people are feeling. So this slide was originally developed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network as part of their psychological first aid kit. And the first thing I want to talk about is safety. So I want to make sure that you're thinking about removing the real or perceived threats to your psychological well-being and your physical well-being. So some of us face challenges every day in terms of stressors to our physical or mental health. So address those as usual. These additional stressors that we're all experiencing with the legislative and executive actions that are being discussed and threatened, those we have to keep in mind, be educated about them, and then understand that you are not alone in this fight. No matter what, there are many people committed to helping keep you safe and to help keep children safe in this state. And that leads me to my second principle, which is calming. So crises create distress, fear, anger, sadness. If you are feeling these things, or if your children are feeling these things, that is normal. That means that you are actually functioning the way you're designed to function. You might be more irritable, you might lose sleep, you might not be able to focus very well. Those symptoms are normal under this kind of situation. They can be addressed, and you will get better once the stress is relieved and once we can help you cope better. So we want you to work within your family to try to think about strategies that help you calm that distress. One of them is this webinar. This webinar is helping you become educated about what to do and how to handle yourself in the situation. Other things you can do that are calming are engage in fun and stress relieving activities. Exercise with your family, play a game together, do things that you enjoy. Make sure that your kiddos have adequate sleep, that you're getting rest, and try to bring in some mindfulness every day. So enjoy nature. Sit in your yard, look at your house plant, play with your pet. Those things are all very easy things available to everyone. Also, very important, the next principle is connectedness. So research shows that like social support is one of the most important things in terms of emotional well-being overall and recovering when you're under stress. So this is the principle that has the most research to support it. And we know that you need to focus on healthy connections. So if you have folks in your life who are not healthy and aren't positive, supportive influences, now is the time to maybe step back from them a little bit and connect with them after this crisis is over and you have more resources. So try to minimize contact with folks who are not positive and supportive when possible. And then take advantage of the positive connections that are being offered. Like today's webinar, where we are reassuring you and demonstrating that many people have spent their entire careers preparing for and to support people in these crises. So literally, folks have trained for years as therapists, as doctors, as lawyers, as advocates. Activists who are involved in this have trained for years, have worked for years to try to create safety for everyone. So there are lots of resources out there. Use them. And then the next principle, yourself and your community efficacy. And what this is going on is saying that, you know, folks show in a disaster, and this is kind of a disaster for Texas, face a loss of their personal or social or even sometimes economic resources, and they don't feel as able to be effective in their life and confident in your community's ability to recover. Our community is resilient, it is strong, it is full of passion to make change and to create equity for everyone. Don't ever doubt that. There are many committed people out here. You all have strengths. Every single one of you has strengths that you can use to protect yourself, your children, and your neighbors. How are you going to integrate those strengths towards your goals? Maybe you're a great conversationalist. You're really good with people. So use those small conversations you have with people to gently educate about why these issues are important. Maybe you're someone who's a great connector. Get involved in your local PFLAG chapter. If you don't have one, contact PFLAG to find out how to start a chapter in your area. Volunteer for a cause that you believe in. Those things are all things that build your sense of having control and the ability to change your community. That is very supportive work to be doing now. And encouraging your kids, start with the activities they're already engaged in. So if your kiddo is very artistic and has been drawing and painting, you know, give them praise for the things that they're accomplishing. Display their work. Organize with other parents to recognize kiddos that are artistic. Enroll them in a special opportunity. This is not the time to hide or be isolated. This is the time to continue your life, continue supporting your children, their interests, their love, their passion in the world, whether it's reading books, writing poetry, riding their bike, whatever it might be, doing makeup, singing, you know, science. Go with what your kid loves and support and encourage them in those activities. And that's going to create a lot of a sense of them having control over their life, right? So I think that if you think about this last one, you'll see how all of these other four go together with instilling hope. Because if you're doing those things, you're going to have a hopeful outlook, right? You're going to have an outlook that you're more optimistic, you're more confident in your ability to cope with this and come through it in a resilient and strong way. So focus on the short term right now. This is not the time for long-term plans. This is the time for what are we doing today? What are we doing this week? And that is plenty to focus on. How can you get, if you're getting derailed, if you're struggling, how can you get back on track for today, for tomorrow, right? Focus on those things. And they can be things as simple as reinforcing things that help your life run smoothly, whether it's your exercise routine, your meal planning, your family activities, getting to bed on time, those things. All those things will support the hope that you have. So I hope you leave this section of our webinar knowing that no matter what, there is a way for you to get in contact with someone who will help you. The Borderline Rainbow Center has a weekly meeting for the family of transgender folks. Everyone is invited. My contact information will go out via the emails of the registered participants here. And if you can't find a resource locally at your community center, the Borderline Rainbow Center will help you virtually. We are licensed. Licensed providers can work anywhere in Texas. So no worries, you're not alone in this. We have your back. That's why we're doing this work. So I'd like to pass the torch to our next presenter. And I want you just to remember that there are lots of passionate people out here. We're with you. We have our eye on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I think you helped give us all a little bit more hope across this very big state. All right, we are going to move on to our next slide. And this is, of course, probably the most important perspective today, because it's one that we're all sharing and talking about. And Rachel Gonzalez is going to talk us through a parent's perspective about what's happening and where we're going from here.
Thank you so much for the intro. My name is Rachel Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns. That was a really amazing, probably the most effective self-care slide I've ever seen. Putting things, at least for me, in perspective like that is really helpful. Thank you so much for that, Brenda. So I've been thinking a lot about what to say to you because we've had such a volatile week, month, year, 5 years. I've been working in LGBTQ advocacy. Sorry, I have a real squeaky front door and all my kids are about to walk in the front door, so apologies for the distraction. I've been doing a lot of advocacy work on behalf of my eldest daughter, Libby. She's 11. In this photo, she was almost 7. She was 6. That was at the beginning of the bathroom bill battle. That was the day before the SB6 hearing. It was a 23-hour hearing. It was awful. And I am constantly saying that it took years off of my life because it was a really brutal slap in the face of the realities of what we were facing in this very carefully orchestrated political attack on our kids. So, sorry, I have this like ring light that's really excessively bright. I wanted to talk about the fact that parents are really, really important in this. We have a very unique perspective in our ability to advocate for our kids, as there's not probably, well, okay, so this is how it's been explained to me by Sarah McBride. I cannot take credit for this, but she has consistently said that parents have a unique perspective because there's not really any other movement in which a population that is not the population that's under attack knows so firsthand what it's like to navigate that space. For parents to navigate name and gender marker changes, accessing healthcare, insurance struggles, the things that we do with our kids, it gives us a really unique perspective into the realities of what it is to live as a transgender person and the struggles that we face in our society. So that makes us really powerful advocates for our kids and really important voices. But it's also really, really important to remember that we are telling our own stories. We're not speaking over trans voices. We're not speaking on behalf of our kids. Certainly, if I am talking about my daughter, I run everything by her, and I highly recommend that anyone that is telling their children's story every single time, check with your kid and make sure that that's okay. And I also really wanted to highlight the fact that it's taken me the last 5+ years to get where I am in my understanding of where the fight has come from, the over half a century that's been put in by advocates and activists the blood, sweat, and tears, everything that has come into the battle up until this point. And I have to consistently remind myself, not just from a point of gratitude, but also just knowing that, well, mostly from a point of gratitude, actually, thinking about how far we've come, because it feels so overwhelming when we're in these moments of, you know, how the hell are we going to get out of this? Just think about what it was like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and our kids have the ability to be themselves in their school environments. And, you know, it's something that it's not something that I've thought about until recently, but I've noticed that in speaking with many friends and parents across the country, many in liberal states where there are affirming policies in place, we have a really unique ability right now in Texas to push the conversation and push people in a way that other states that are not going through these horrific attacks, they don't necessarily have the urgency that we have. So, for example, I am working on a panel for my daughter's school right now. Teachers have been reaching out to me, friends have been reaching out to me. We have an opportunity to really get people to think about the way that they personally interact with their own gender biases in our culture, and how we can create a world that is more inclusive here in Texas and across the country. And I have seen many times over where there are helpful policies in place, but because there isn't the urgency to create inclusive environments for kids, you see gender biases play out just rampantly. And families have really similar issues that we see in less affirming areas across Texas. I'm in Dallas, so we have a really great environment here on the daily, which gives us a little more bandwidth to be able to go to Austin and fight these fights, because like we were talking about in the last slide, it's really important to keep the normalcy of lives in place. And we are afforded that privilege where my daughter is affirmed. She's been in 3 different schools throughout her life, and in every school environment she's been affirmed, and that has afforded us the bandwidth to be able to go to Austin and share our story and talk to legislators. And so I wanted to touch on a little bit about testifying and sharing your story again. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but as we've talked about a little bit through this, political theater is a huge part of what we're facing right now. And there are so many people that I think really don't want to see our kids hurt, but because this has been turned into this orchestrated attack for political leverage, it takes a lot of creativity on our parts to counter those attacks. And I think that we were so effective as families in the bathroom bill battle that they realized they needed to discredit parents, because parents were doing a really good job of showing exactly how life is with a trans kid, and that our kids are certainly not something to be afraid of in the restroom at school. So that's why we're seeing these attacks on parents as child abusers, and obviously the many layers of things that have been filed this session and then in the special sessions. Excuse me. But it's also really important to keep in mind the talking points that we have, and when you are asked specific questions, make sure you are giving very concise, specific answers, because there have been so many people working really hard to be able to do things like name and gender marker change in a very seamless way here in Texas. And not just that, but that's one of the things that we don't want to point them into more directions that they realize we are making progress, and tip off the opposers of equality and give them things to then attack us even more on. So I'm here, and I'm happy to help with if you're planning to testify, if you need help with your school board or teachers or principal. There are so many resources available, and I think those resources are going out tomorrow. And I will put some contact information for me on there as well. And hopefully we can put together some training for parents in the next months with, I have been media trained. I started media training with some other parents in 2016 in preparation for the 2017 legislative session. And this is something that I have become very accustomed to talking about, but I realize that it isn't that easy for everyone to sit down and talk about these things. But we are at a really, really critical moment where this is so much bigger than what families and the trans community can take on alone. We really need every single ally to stand up with us and fight these bigoted attacks on our kids. I have personally never felt this defeated as I have in the last weeks, as this just seems like it's never going to end. And so I know that feeling. I know it's really real, and I definitely don't want to overlook that. But I think that we really need to push for allies, whoever you are comfortable talking to, whether you're comfortable making a Facebook post or sending out an email, depending on how out your family is. Whoever you have in your corner, reach out to them and let them know that this is the time where we really, really need their support. That there are so many things on the line, and we really can't afford to continue making progress for our kids without their help. So I'm happy to answer questions, and everyone else, if I have overlooked something that I was going to mention, please point that out to me.
And so this is Shelley. Let me just add to what Rachel was saying and also to what Brenda was saying. So the first thing I want everyone to know is that you have support, there is hope, and we have your back. And so when I say that, what I mean is that Lambda Legal and the ACLU came out during the regular session and said that to the extent that there were any, I'm going to call them healthcare bans against gender affirming care for trans youth, to the extent that any of those passed through the legislature, we intended to sue. And so I'm going to say that we've seen the letters that I talked about at the beginning of the discussion. We know we're in another special session. We know so far that healthcare bans are not on the governor's call, but what we said before, the ACLU and Lambda Legal, still applies. So know that we're here on that front. Second of all, we've seen over 250 anti-LGBT bills that were filed across state legislatures in this country this last year. Many of those, in fact, almost 40% of them, a lot of them were really filed here in Texas, and not one of them passed through the regular session, right? So that is a testament to the parents, to the community going out there and saying, here's what my lived experience is. Here is the impact of this proposed legislation. I'm going to come talk about tips on testifying in just a minute. But what I would like folks to know that of the laws that have passed that are anti-LGBT laws, so not just trans related, but many of them are against the trans community, many of them have already been stopped before they ever went into effect. So we had an anti-trans law that went into effect in Idaho a couple of years ago. That was stopped by a Trump-appointed judge. We had an anti-trans athlete bill that went into effect in West Virginia. That was stopped before that went into effect. We had one healthcare ban. We've only had really two that have gone through legislatures, one in Arkansas and one in Tennessee. And the one in Arkansas was stopped before it went into effect. We also saw in Tennessee, well, the anti-trans law in Tennessee healthcare ban only affects kids who might receive puberty blockers, but it's directed at kids who haven't gone through puberty. So it's really, it's a non-law because no one is violating it. Maybe that's the way to say it. And then we also saw in Tennessee a law that would have said that every business that was going to allow someone to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity, that business would have to post a sign letting everyone know that came into the business that that business was going to allow folks to use the bathroom that matched their gender identity. That law was stopped before it ever went into effect. So the point of me telling you all of that is to A, bring hope again, to put the governor's letter to the commissioner in context, to put Brian Slayton's letter to the commissioner asking the commissioner to find that puberty blockers, hormones, and even mental health care might also be considered child abuse. Brian Slayton proposed 8 different amendments to legislation during the regular session that would have banned gender affirming care for trans youth. Not one of them got any uptake. So to put all of that in context, I want you to understand that. The other thing to know about the commissioner is, again, let me say this, she's not a judge. She can't issue what's an advisory opinion because there's not real live people that have been harmed in front of her. And before any changes can be made to current law, separate and apart from the additional protections, and I didn't tell you all of them that are there in the family code when we spoke a few minutes ago. But she cannot on her own say that a law or child abuse is going to be interpreted differently than it's been interpreted before without going through a notice and comment process where any change would be published in what's called the Texas Register. There's 30 days of notice and comment where experts, people like Dr. Megan Mooney, who has testified against some of the healthcare bans in the past, people like Rachel Gonzalez, who's here on this call, can talk about what that looks like. So I want to give you that context to hopefully help you recognize that you don't have to be in fear. And then the other thing I would say with respect to testifying, just really quickly, I'll go through this. I think we're okay on time. Yeah, let me just give you a couple tips on testifying, and do reach out to Rachel. Do look at the resources that we're going to send to you. And before I say that, let me come back and say that the AMA, the American Medical Association, came out at the end of April, on April the 26th, and wrote a letter to the governors of every state and said, look, there are normal variations in gender identity, and best practice medical care is a decision between parents, doctors, their team of physicians and mental health providers, and stay out of that relationship. They re-upped that guidance again on June the 15th, reiterating their commitment to that. And every major medical association and mental health provider in the United States, over 647,000 providers, have said this is best practice, medically necessary care. So know that all of that is out there as a resource too. So let's come to testifying. If we end up in a situation where any of you all are going to go and testify, whether you're going to go in person and give oral testimony or whether you're going to do written testimony, here's my tips on how to do it. And then if you're asked questions, say you're there in person and you're asked questions by a legislator, let me give you some tips on that. So let's start with how to do your written testimony and how to do your oral testimony. The big thing that lawyers need, that we need in order to be able to show discrimination and in order to be able to bring lawsuits, is to show what is that impact of that proposed legislation on real people's lives. So what you should do is start out, you're going to give the legislators a roadmap. Here's who I am and here's what I want. I'm against this legislation. Then what I want you to do is the best practice would be to describe the impact that this, remember the impact that this legislation will have on you and your family from your own personal knowledge. So how this is going to affect you. Then you can provide up to 3 specific examples of what that would look like or what's happened in the past. And then you would conclude and you would say, here's who I am, here's why this matters to me, here's the impact on my family, and here's what I want. I'm against it. That's not hard. All of us can do that. So that's one of the materials we'll send out to you. Then, if you're asked questions by a legislator during a hearing, this is really simple and easy, y'all. It's common sense, okay? Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Always tell the truth. That's easy, right? Then answer only the questions that's asked. Give a clear and concise answer to the question that's asked. If you don't understand the question, you can say, hey, I don't understand the question. I don't know what you mean. Please tell me, please repeat it. The next thing you need to know is always testify from your personal experiences. Your personal experience, when I say that, what you have seen, what you have heard, what you have felt, what you have personally witnessed. Your story and your facts, not anybody else's, because that's all that you know, and you can only talk about what's in your personal knowledge. If a legislature asks you a question about something that's not within your personal knowledge, something that has happened to somebody else, something that might happen in the future, you don't know because you haven't experienced it. Somebody else experienced it. You don't know what somebody else was thinking when they chose to engage in certain conduct. You don't know what was in their head, so you can't testify about that, what that would be. That's speculating, right? So something in the future, something that you didn't hear, feel, see, or actually impact you, or something about what motivated somebody else to do something, you can't answer that because it's speculation. That's what lawyers do. They ask you to speculate about things because they want you to agree with them to get you to the result that they want. That's what the legislators did to folks that testified. Don't speculate. You don't have to. You just say, I don't know. That didn't happen to me. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, because you really don't, right? And so then the last piece is don't ever give an opinion about something that's not within your expertise. So if you're not a mental health professional, if you're not a medical doctor, if you're not a lawyer, then you can't testify about medical procedures. You can't testify about whether a law violates equal protection or not. You can't talk about those things that you're not an expert in. So if they ask you a question about that, just say, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not in this other person's shoes. I can't talk about that. Those are really simple, easy tips, I think, for all of us to remember. And our nature as human beings is to want to agree with people, to want to give them more information, to want to justify why we are engaging in behavior that seems right and feels right to us, right? So our mental health professionals, I'm not one, but I think that this would be within the realm of what they would say, is that, you know, you don't have to justify your behavior. You're entitled to make the decisions you make about you and your kids, and you don't have to justify that to anybody. And the laws that we're facing across the country, what they do is they violate the law in so many different ways. I'm going to say at least 5. And they are examples of unwarranted governmental intrusion into our lives. And that's against the law. So know that there's hope out there for all of us. And I hope that helps y'all put all of this in context. Thank you.
Shelley, can I add a couple things?
You bet.
This is Rachel again. So I just wanted to add that you also, I think it's a very powerful statement, but it's an important one. If they're asking you things about your children specifically or your family, anything that's private or personal to your journey, you should absolutely say that that is private information and you are not comfortable sharing that on public record or with anyone who is not in your family. Something along those lines that just reiterates the fact that this is private medical information and no one has the right to be involved in that except for you, your kid, and their physician. And, you know, if they are asking invasive questions about things like birth certificates, you can just not answer. And maybe Shelley, you disagree with that, but I think in general, I think it is important to remember that you can just say, like, this is private information. And remember that whatever you say is on public record forever, which is something I learned the hard way. So you should definitely consider what exactly you're saying. I would strongly recommend against using your kids' birth names, any kind of information that they might, even if they're comfortable with you referencing it in private, that is super public information that can be then leveraged against them later if somebody got a hold of it, the wrong people listened to or whatever. So those kinds of things you just want to be really mindful of because they can be used against you. So
yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that especially for folks who identify with a gender that's different than the sex they were assigned at birth, in our state, particularly in the rural areas, you know, you can be a target, whether it's on the internet or in some other way. And so, quick plug for Lambda, again, we are doing trainings. We've been doing 2 of these trainings a month. Pete does this very, very well as well, but there are certain places in our state where you can do a name change and or a gender marker. And so what we do is we do trainings for folks so that they can learn how to do this for themselves. And also you can do name changes and gender marker corrections for both, I'll go ahead and say, adults and minors. And we do trainings on how to do that, whether you're a lawyer. We offer free CLE credit for that. And it's actually 1.5 hours and 0.5 hours of ethics. So I know we all need ethics if there's any lawyers on this call. But we do 2 of those a month. And the goal is really to be of service to our trans community, who Texas is one of the worst offenders with respect to folks who don't have identity documents that match who they are. And as one of our great lawyers here in our state, Claire Bowe, has said, having identity documents that match who you are is a license to live. And for those folks who are transgender, that's really true. And we are all here to help you, and we do this as a labor of love. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelley and Rachel. All those tips were really insightful. I'll add one other quick testifying tip to Shelley's point of only answering the question that you're asked. A lot of times human nature is also to anticipate what question is coming and answer before then, or think of the answer in your head before the full question comes out. Always wait for the full question and don't assume what somebody else is asking you. Wait for that question to come in and then take your time, formulate your response, think through it. And like Shelley and Rachel both touched on, think about, you know, is this something that will help or hurt? And what import can I give to this answer I'm about to provide? With that being said, I think we have a few minutes for some questions here. And so I will invite everybody to submit questions. I don't see any in our queue at this time. So I will go to our Q&A slide. But before we get to the Q&A slide, I'll stop here and kind of harken back to, while everybody's submitting their questions, what was said earlier. And I think, as Rachel alluded to, Brenda did a fantastic job in going through some of those tips. Step number one, just breathe. Super overwhelming, no matter where you are on this side of it. If you're a parent, if you're a provider, if you are an ally, wherever your position is, it can be a very difficult time in so many ways. So breathe and try to keep focus on what's important, which, as Brenda talked about earlier, is just keeping your life as normal as you can and moving forward. Two, don't lose hope. Again, came back to that whole big picture theme of hope. And like I think has been established throughout this webinar, you have hope from a lot of different angles. You have healthcare providers that are here to support you, mental health providers that are here to support you, attorneys and attorney resources that are here to support you, other parents, allies. Just there's a wealth of people in this state, despite what it may seem like sometimes everybody being against us. There's a lot of people that are here for you to help uplift you and keep you afloat and keep your family connected and doing well. To the next point, keep updated and connected with friends. And again, we're here as things develop. When I say we, I'm referring to all the partners that we had here sponsored today. You should follow, if you're not already, all of these folks on social media so that you can stay connected, get the most up-to-date information. And like Brenda talked about, sometimes just having that background knowledge, that little bit of perspective can bring you some hope and some peace in a time when the unknown can be scary. So some of this information can help provide some mental health support as well. So I would follow everybody up here on the screen: Equality Texas, Borderland Rainbow Center, Lambda Legal, Trans Legal Aid Clinic Houston, Resource Center, National Association of Social Workers, Texas Chapter, Doctors for Change. And they are not listed up here, but they're a phenomenal resource. TENT, Transgender Education Network Texas. They keep everybody up to date and do so in a great, affirming, easy to understand way. So I would suggest following them as well. I don't see any questions coming in, so with the last couple of minutes, I will plug Trans Legal Aid Clinic of Houston because I have a little bit of time to do that, and I'll turn it back to our presenters. Our name and gender marker correction clinics are held every other month, the odd months of the year, on the third Thursday and Saturday. We post them on our socials on Instagram and Facebook. All you have to do is sign up and you can attend. We are trying to get back to offering some in-person clinics in the Houston area, but COVID is making that very difficult. But the good news is, for now, we are virtual and still operating. We have, I think we're probably close to 30 volunteer attorneys that rotate in and out and help with this. So you get the assistance of a licensed Texas attorney, or someone supervised by a licensed Texas attorney, like a law student, who will assist you in getting all of your documents filled out to be filed to correct your name or the name and gender marker of a minor, so that you can go ahead and move forward with that process. We also provide monetary resources to the extent they are necessary, and do some other stuff too. So I invite you to attend one of our clinics. Do sign up for one of those if it's something of interest to you, or you just have questions about the process for you or for someone you know. We are happy to help, and we really enjoy doing it. Again, those are being held virtually, either via WebEx or Zoom. So no matter where you are in the state of Texas, we can help. Like Brenda said, we're a huge state. We've got big cities, rural areas, but we want to help as far and wide as we can, and hopefully we are on the road to doing that. Let me see.
Can I add one more shout out?
Absolutely.
So UT Law, not unlike what Pete does, has what they call the Gender Affirmation Project, and they have a legal clinic that does great work. They've been doing this for a long time, and actually the clinic will be opening up right after Labor Day this year. And so UT Law has a legal clinic, so does UNT Law. And we're working with Texas Tech, so we're working out there in West Texas, El Paso area, Alpine, to bring this to folks out there. And like Pete said, this can be done online. So you don't have to take a day off of work. You can be in Alpine, Texas, or down near Big Bend and still get the identity documents that you need. And so I implore everybody to reach out to these great organizations. And what Pete does and the clinic is amazing. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Shelley. I appreciate that. Anybody else, Brenda or Rachel, do you have anything else that you would like to add before we wrapped up?
This is Rachel. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody that joined us tonight. Like I mentioned, we can't do it alone, and that means we need parents and everyone that we can in the community to help fight this, because the opposers of equality want us to be divided, and so we need to stick together and fight this. And so I'm deeply grateful for everyone who has joined us. Thank you so much.
And I just want to say, just remind everybody, take good care of yourself, right? Make space for your own needs in this process. The fight's going to be there. We need all your help, but we also need you healthy and safe. So reach out when you need support, because there are people here for you. Never underestimate the impact of mental health. It's just as important as your physical health. So I really encourage you to network and use the resources that we've worked so hard to create for you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. And as someone brought to my attention in our question box, if any youth needs support, Hatch is 3 nights a week on Zoom, and there is also Hatch Junior for youth 9 to 12 available on Zoom. I am not personally, obviously, I'm a little too old for these youth programs, but I would assume that many of the local organizations are having Zoom programs, as I think Brenda talked about earlier. So again, reach out to any local organization, LGBT organization or center that you can find that can provide you with those. And I think just a couple of other things before we wrap up. Everybody that is registered as a participant will be receiving an email from Doctors for Change probably tomorrow. That follow-up will come with some resources and information. I have to thank all of our excellent panelists, because gosh, I would not have been able to navigate the information that you provided. So thank you so much for doing that. I think I speak for everyone in attendance when I say you all did a fantastic job. And also thank you to everybody who signed on and participated. Again, I know this is a super trying time, as most times in recent years have been, but hopefully the tides will turn soon and you have a network of support here that's ready to show up when and wherever you are. We will probably be doing another webinar within the next month. It might come up sooner, so follow the social media of sponsors and keep your eyes peeled in your email for that. Again, thanks to everyone. And with that, I think we will close this out. Hope everybody has a great night and leaves here with a little bit of hope from all of our presenters today.